Hello, welcome to the Elevate Dataviz Show, episode 4. I'm going to run out of fingers soon. We're going to have to coordinate so we can add them all up. All right, we are here to explore current topics in data visualization, share our creative inspiration and the tools and techniques that we're experimenting with as practicing information designers. Today, our topic is Dataviz Awards, and I guess just awards in general, design awards. What are the pros? What are the pros and cons of having the awards, participating in them, celebrating them? What's the value of a win? Is there a value of a win? And lots more. I'm Allie Torben. We also have Duncan Gear and Will Chase. Before we jump into our topic today, the show is supported by the members of the Elevate Dataviz learning community who get the opportunity to watch and ask questions live. If you would like to do that and you want to level up your Dataviz skills in a supportive community, check out elevatedataviz.com. Okay, Dataviz Awards. Now, we're talking about this topic because Data Visualization Society is in the middle of doing the Information is Beautiful Awards, but caveat, we're not talking about DVS Awards, the IIB Awards specifically. We're talking about awards in general, right?
Right.
Okay. So maybe we can go around and say what a pro of a Dataviz award you think is?
Well, I mean, maybe we should give some context probably, because I think probably there's going to be like a bunch of people who are going to be watching this and be like, is there any problem with awards? Like, why is this even a topic of discussion, right? Yep. And I think it's probably worth kind of mentioning that, as you mentioned, some of the context of this is that the DVS has taken over the Information is Beautiful Awards this year. It hasn't been run for the last 3 years. The last time it was run, it was in 2019. Mm-hmm. And this year, the DVS made a deal with them to run a Dataviz Awards show. And it's also in the context of several other Dataviz Awards kind of programs shutting down recently. I think there's been like a couple of data journalism ones, right, Will?
Yeah, I believe so. So I'm not, you actually were the one that told me that I can't pronounce it. I'm sorry. Malofier has maybe shut down, which I vaguely remembered, but like didn't pay too much attention to because I generally just sort of like ignore awards until it's like, time, and then either frantically try to submit
last
something
minute submission
or, when they come out, go, oh, wow, that's cool. Good for the New York Times. They won again. So
yeah, I mean, you're jumping a little forward to what are some of the issues with awards, but
right.
But yeah, so the DVS picked up the IIB Awards after a couple of years of there being almost no awards in Dataviz at all. There may have been a couple that are slipping my mind right now, but I can't think of any really off the top of my head, specifically Dataviz Awards.
Yeah.
And when the announcement was made, there was some, chat on Twitter and around the community about whether this was a good thing for the DVS to be doing. And, the DVS listened to this and they, made the decision to go ahead with it. And, they're absolutely within their rights to do that. But I think it's, I found it really, really interesting starting to think about like, now awards are not necessarily here. Like, are they useful to the community? Are they the best way of lifting up a community? I think there are some really, really interesting questions around that and, potential for alternative models, in the same way that we've seen alternative models arise around conferences over the last few years, online models and other things. I think that it is probably worth asking the same question for awards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I think just sort of now that I've had a sec to think about your actual question, Duncan, I'll give it answers because I think it's helpful to sort of give a lay of the land of like specifically Dataviz Awards. There's a lot of design, random, sort of open awards that you can enter, and some people do in the Dataviz category, but specifically for Dataviz, there's sort of two like categories of awards. And one is like these awards that are specifically targeted generally at journalism. And they're, large awards run by professional companies, and they've been run for many, many years. So that was Malofier until recently. And then there's the big one is Society for News Design. So this is one of probably, I would say, the largest, DataViz awards that's run today is the SNDs, which have all kinds of categories and stuff. And then there's like a couple smaller ones, I think, that are again targeted at like professional organizations. So there's Sigma. There's this data journalism award from a place called Sigma, which is relatively new and still a little smaller. But these are distinct because in order to enter, you must be part of a professional, like you must be a professional journalist who published this in a, reputable journalism outlet. So you can't just, submit
There's so much gatekeeping there, but
random sketch, right? Yeah. So that's sort of an issue there. And there's a whole sort of separate set of issues that go along with that we can get into later maybe. But the other type of award is the IIB, which is different because, anyone can submit, and you can basically submit any type of work. So it doesn't have to be journalistic. You can be an individual, you can be a company, you can be a journalism organization, but it's really much more open and free. And the other award that I want to shout out, it's very, very small, but it was useful in my career, is the Pudding Cup.
Oh, that's right.
So the Pudding every year has a thing they call the Pudding Cup, where they let people submit personal projects. I believe it's mainly targeted at personal projects. And they just select a few winners. So,
can you say why that was impactful to your career?
Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't know that it was. Nobody's told me like, oh, I hired you because you won the Pudding Cup. But I did one year, so it was relatively early in my career, and I would say it was the first like big, large scale data story that I ever made. Which I entered.
What was the story?
It was on earthquakes, remotely triggered earthquakes. I can find a link.
Right. Is it the one you did in Mapbox?
Yes, Mapbox. Yeah. And I actually made this for a separate contest, which was not like an awards thing, but it was like a contest that was sponsored by Mapbox and some other company. And then I submitted it again to IIB and again to the Pudding Cup. So you can kind of double, triple dip on these things, which is useful. So I highly recommend doing that. But yeah, I that project ended up getting shortlisted at IIB, which was great. And then it won the Pudding Cup, one of a couple of winners that year. So I think they select a few winners. And, I mean, for someone, this is the big advantage, right? This is the huge advantage of something like IIB or these other awards, is that someone who's very early in their career and doesn't have a whole pedigree of, I've been in DataViz for 10 years, or I went to school, I have a degree. A lot of us are career switchers. We don't have the professional background. So how do you prove to someone like, I am an expert in this field, I know what I'm doing, I can produce good work? One way is to say, I made this thing and it won an award. And that was what I was able to do. And I think it gave me a lot of legitimacy early on.
Legitimacy to yourself?
I mean, somewhat, right? It feels good to win. I don't think I would have felt it was unexpected. So I did not think I would win this. So I don't think I would have been like terribly upset if I hadn't. But legitimacy to others, I think, like the ability, this is the resume stamp, you can put on your resume, I am an award-winning data visualization specialist, whatever.
Yeah, to me, that's kind of the biggest benefit of an award, is that it gives you a way to have a little bit of social proof, like you said, at the beginning of your career, where maybe you don't have that, what do they call it? Like a logo blanket of logos on your website of, I worked with so-and-so and so-and-so, you don't have that on your website yet. And you're trying to build a portfolio. Someone comes and sees your portfolio. Maybe they don't really know the difference. Is this good? It looks pretty good. I don't know. But if it showed, you are able to put on there, hey, this won an award in my field. It's like, oh, wow, that sounds legitimate.
Right.
Yeah, that third-party credibility, I think, can be really, really valuable, especially when you're dealing with clients who don't necessarily know the field so well. And
Absolutely.
they don't want to think like, oh, I'm, hiring somebody who's very average. They want to think I'm hiring an award winner, and they want to be able to tell their boss, we hired an award-winning, information designer or whatever. So that can be really, really valuable in tipping somebody over the edge from not really considering you to strongly considering you, I think.
Yeah, it's important to note that third party thing. I think it's definitely, again, it just gives you a wider reach. And so like Duncan said, if someone goes to your portfolio and they're not an expert, so they can't independently evaluate if your work is really great. But that's a way for them to see it. But like, to anyone out there, do not feel bad if you don't have like awards or anything. Like, this is not a requirement at all. When I'm interviewing candidates for jobs, I could care less if they have awards, or couldn't care less. Yeah, I don't care if they have awards. So when I go to someone's portfolio, I'm purely evaluating the work and what I think, the level of quality is, and whether it won an award or not has no sway whatsoever on my
That's
opinion.
an interesting point, because you know what you're looking at, right?
Yes, because I know
Right.
what I'm looking at. But for people that don't, then, that's where it really comes in handy.
I think there's another angle here, because I mean, we're talking about this from the perspective of independent freelancers and independent consultants and things like that as individuals. But I think for an organization, winning an award can also have huge reputational benefits around things like getting grants if you're an NGO, securing larger partnerships with companies. Like, if you can show that the work that you are doing is award winning, that can really open doors when people are considering applications that you're putting in and things like that. So I think it can be hugely valuable at an organizational level as well as at an individual level.
Yeah.
Any other pros that you think?
I mean, I have lots of pros. I think it's a great way to document a lot of the good work that's going on in the community. There's so much awesome work being produced nowadays that, something like IIB, where you have an open submission and things are all categorized and listed and easily linked out to. I know I use it this way, and a lot of people use it as just a way to go and be like, hey, let's see what is a bunch of the great work that's been done in the past year.
What was shortlisted in the business analytics section or something? Get some dashboard ideas.
Yeah, it's a great source of inspiration.
Yeah, and again, from outside the field, it kind of showcases to outsiders like the very best of what that field can offer. I think that's a really, really useful thing for the data visualization industry, which does sometimes struggle to kind of prove its value as an independent, field, as opposed to just like an offset of design or an offset of an offshoot of like data analysis or something like that. I think it can be really, really helpful to say, these are the best visualizations this year.
Yeah, it's like the field of data visualizations portfolio.
Right.
Our field portfolio.
Yeah. And I think
assuming everyone enters the awards, yes.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's definitely, a little bit of an issue, a bias, because it's who entered. And to be clear, I mean, I do go and look at who won, but I don't really like filter down to, the medal winners or the shortlisters, or for SND, the people that won the awards. I just look at the entry showcase because, the award who won is, I find, often very, very subjective. And so a lot of the ones that I think are my favorite projects maybe are just entered and didn't get anywhere. But it just, again, it serves as a great repository that I reference again and again and again. I mean, probably every month I'm going to SND or IIB just because I remembered, what was that project? I forgot, but I think it was in the awards. Let me go look it up.
Just for people to catch up, SND is the Society for News Design, and IIB is the Information is Beautiful Awards.
Yes.
Thank you. When I first started my podcast, 2018, I didn't know, since I was new to the field, I didn't really know where to look for great data visualizations outside the newspaper. I'm just not going to like talk to only just the New York Times or Washington Post designers. I want to see what else is out there. So I exclusively was looking through the IIB awards, their repository, the long list, the short list, just scrolling through to see what caught my attention, what I thought was really cool, and pulling guests off from there. So it is a really great way to get inspiration.
And I think that there's also an element of convening the community around a single event. And I think this one particularly applies to the IIB awards, and less so smaller awards or less specialist awards. That it really kind of like brings the community together in that it is what people are talking about at a certain time. If there is a physical in-person, get together or something like that, then it gives people an opportunity to meet each other. I pitched my Loud Numbers idea to Miriam, my co-host of my podcast, at the IIB Awards 2019 when we were both there in person. And if that hadn't been there, I wouldn't be able to do that, So I think that there's definitely, it serves a similar function in that way to the way that conferences can, getting people in one place, facilitating conversation. I think that can be a benefit of awards as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, a very sort of maybe a silly one, but for me, awards have often helped me as a forcing function to finish stuff.
Oh yeah, that's
true.
Yeah.
I know the deadline's coming up to submit it, and I go, oh, it's like I've had this thing at 95% done for months. Okay, I just gotta wrap it up before the awards.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I found too, because I submitted a couple client work, and it was to the IIB awards, and it was nice to be able to say to my client, like, hey, I'm submitting this to an award, and like, it got longlisted, and if it gets shortlisted, like that's a nice thing to be able to say to your client, and some not justification. What's the word?
It makes them feel good about having hired you.
Yeah, right.
They could win an award.
No buyer's remorse.
Right.
But you're right. Making me finish certain things and make sure it was ready was really helpful. What about, I was just thinking about the submission process. It is hard with awards, like you said, Will, because people have to choose to submit. So kind of awareness, like, oh, I didn't even hear about it, or I missed the deadline or something. And then you kind of missed, because like I know for the IIB awards, the work has to have been created in this time frame in order for this cycle. So like if you do miss the submission time, then you can't submit it next year, which is kind of sad if you missed it. And if you're not on social media, I mean, how else do you hear about these things, right?
Yeah.
So that is definitely filters out a lot of good work.
By joining Elevate, that's how you hear about it.
Oh yeah, join the Elevate community, because we talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been encouraging our members to submit and giving them tips on what they should include and all of this stuff, because it isn't always super obvious in a submissions process, like what you should say about your work, which images you should include, how you should kind of frame it, is this worth me spending the time doing the submission on? I mean, one thing that was very nice about the IIB Awards this year is that the submissions were very lightweight. It wasn't difficult to submit something, and it didn't cost a lot of money. So there wasn't really a whole lot of opportunity cost in submitting. And I think the best awards are that situation. It does make it life harder for the judges, but I think if you want your awards to be more inclusive and representative of the wider community, you should make it absolutely as easy and simple as possible to submit.
Yeah, it was even free for people who did non-commissioned work. So
yeah, really, I mean, I think we should maybe that's a good segue to we can sort of transition to some of the things that could be better about Dataviz awards. And I think the first one is barriers to entry, right? So like Ali talked about, the time frame requirements, which sometimes are a little bit arbitrary and kind of like, they may not make sense in your head, or the cost is a big one. So like, I think, that's in my mind, the best thing that IIB does is make it free for non-commercial individuals to submit their work. It really adds up, and even for organizations. So, SND, so the Society for News Design is, that's sort of the big award in data visualization for journalism. And it's quite expensive to enter. I think they have this weird process where you can enter the same project like 5 times in like all these different categories and things. So you like up your chances of winning, because there's like, the way they break down the categories, like you can submit the same project again and again on like slightly different technicalities.
Buy 5 lottery tickets rather than just one.
Yeah, I mean, it's like at the Grammys, how they have best album and best record, right? Which are the same award, essentially. But, so SND does the same thing, where they have like best page design and then like best interactive story, which are like the same thing, basically. But, and then, you can submit to each of those, and then you can submit to like health and science and coronavirus. And like, so you can submit the same thing for like 6 different subcategories.
Paying every time.
You pay every time,
yes,
right?
and you pay a fee every time. So
Wow.
like when we did SND submissions earlier this year, I think we submitted not that many projects, like 2 or 3 projects, and it was upwards of $300. And so
Each time.
No, I mean that was total, I think. But that was just
for an independent freelancer, that can be a lot of money.
Right. That can be exactly. And even for some organizations, I mean, people tend to assume, for Axios, that was not a big deal. They were happy to pay for it. But, there are a lot of much smaller publications in journalism that are very, very strapped for cash and don't have a lot of, disposable funds. I know that there's a really big thread that, what's his name? I forget his name, but on Twitter, he's basically the person that runs the data journalism at Quartz, the magazine Quartz. And he posted a big thread about, SND and awards and submissions and how much it costs. And he said, our budget allows us to do 6 submissions, whatever that may be. And if you look at the numbers, like Washington Post submitted like 124 or something, and New York Times submitted like 200 things to these awards, and Quartz submitted 6 because that's what their budget allows.
Wow.
So that's like it's basically pay to win in some of these scenarios.
Yeah, there's a real inequality of opportunity, I think, in that situation, and that's, I think, one thing that is very, very difficult about it. That awards in this way will tend to reinforce existing power structures in that way. I think that if you are big, you will have more money and you can afford to enter more. Yeah, basically, it's as simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, the flip side of that, to be fair, like, awards charging money for entries is not a bad thing on the whole, right? Because I mean,
you're gonna have to make the case for that. Go on.
Okay, you can make a case. I mean, in my opinion, so you can argue, right? That arguably, but something to always keep in mind is that behind the scenes, it takes hundreds and hundreds of hours of work to administer an award.
Absolutely.
And so either you rely on unpaid labor, which has its own issues, or you pay people to do that. Now, certainly there's organizations that charge exorbitant fees and just pocket that money, and that's, clearly unethical. But, to expect something like IIB to be run entirely for free and just all on volunteer labor is, I think sort of unfair in a lot of ways.
But there's a third way, right? For years and years and years, IIB was sponsored by Kantar.
Sure.
And so I think sponsorship is, if you can get it, a very good opportunity. It's a good opportunity, I think, for everyone. It's a good opportunity for the people running the awards because they can broaden the reach by making entry free. It's obviously good for the people entering because they can submit their things for free. And it's good for the sponsor because they get to appear, they get their name right next to the very best data visualization.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think if you can get sponsorship, that is the ideal scenario for sure.
Yeah, I can see it being hard to get sponsors though. I like to get the money that you need.
right now, I think that's definitely true. I think maybe, 4 or 5 years ago, I think it probably wasn't as difficult, but I think right now it's probably more difficult than it has been in a long time, especially in the tech world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and specifically data visualization. You're doing data visualization awards. It's not like all of tech or all of journalism. I mean, it's getting pretty niche to get a sponsor to pay a really big amount of money, I would think.
But I mean, there are plenty of profitable companies that exist in just that niche, right? you know? So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to think that they might want to have their stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they have to
showcase their stuff to that audience.
Yeah, they have to think that it's worth the investment. Like they can't get it anywhere else. They probably might feel like they can get it somewhere else free. Like what about Tableau? They can get free marketing through the other things that the user groups and the visionary.
I was just going to ask about Tableau. Don't they actually have some kind of
their own awards?
Their own awards, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is quite one of the interesting things that you can do as a tool creator, which is award the best things created with your tool. And of course, that's going to exclude all of the work that isn't made with your tool.
Right.
But if you're big enough, then I think, and Tableau is very big, then I think that it can be a really good way of spreading, it brings all of the benefits that we talked about earlier to specifically your community. And I think it's probably a really smart move.
That's what your Mapbox one will, right?
Yeah.
Your Mapbox one was sponsored by Mapbox to use Mapbox.
Right. I mean, exactly. And the, that's sort of, I didn't mention that exactly, but to me, it's sort of an adjacent category to just like open awards is contests, which is, that was a contest technically that, they solicited, create a piece specifically for this contest using these tools. And it's sort of like a short, there's a deadline, whatever. But yeah, I mean, that to me, it has a lot of the same benefits and costs as the open awards. And I've also benefited from contests. That one, there was a contest I did for Nat Geo, which was similar in some ways. And again, led to good things in my life.
That's a great point, Duncan, is maybe tools can basically sponsor their own because the ROI is a little bit more direct, right?
Absolutely.
You're like, we're going to be getting a lot more people on our platforms in order to try to get the award. So that definitely makes more business sense, because I always wondered, like, what is Kantar really getting out of it? Sponsoring the IIB awards,
I mean, prestige and thought leadership opportunities. I think there are plenty of things. There are plenty of ways that Kantar can argue that they're getting quite a lot.
I wonder if maybe they didn't see it. They didn't, because they stopped doing it. So
perhaps.
maybe it didn't actualize. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, also they stopped doing it around during the pandemic, and so it was kind of obvious to stop it then. So I can't speculate about the reasons why they stopped. But I mean, I think one thing that's quite interesting about this idea of tool-specific awards is that one of the issues that I have often with more broad data visualization awards is that data visualization is crazy diverse, right? It is almost impossible to make a value judgment between, I don't know, a super insightful exploratory analysis of something versus a data illustration that appears on social media. You can't compare those two things directly. They might both be extremely effective at doing their job, but the job is so different that how do you pick between them?
Yeah, that's what I've always kind of felt like you said, Will, like when it comes, like you submit and then it comes to the judging and you're like, you can't really hold on too tight because you just never know who the person, they might, like I submitted one of my comics. Someone might hate comics, just like, I don't want to see this in the field of Dataviz, and just be mad, and give me a 0 or however they score. Yeah. So you're really just like putting it in the hands of the judges, and there's a lot of bias in there and likes and dislikes.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is something that, again, when we talk about like what can award shows do right, this is the crux of designing a good award, right? Is like, how many categories do you include? Because obviously including more categories allows for more of that, not comparing apples to oranges. But then if you make like too many categories, the award kind of becomes meaningless, right? Because it's like, oh, I won, best like illustrated dashboard on healthcare policy or whatever.
Posted
in
on
the
Twitter.
state of
Yeah.
in the color blue.
Right. So, that's a fine line you have to ride, I think. But I do think IIB in particular has a pretty good approach where they have a fair number of topic categories. And then they also have a little bit of like special awards,
It's about subject matter though, right? It's not not about like tooling or approach.
I think they have one new one about business analytics or something. That's more
they have a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Because they have they have this new dashboard category, which is like business tool that you've developed, which I think is nice. And then they have some of the special awards, which I think are kind of like removed from the general category. So it's like
those tend to award people, right, and studios rather than pieces of work.
Some of them are pieces of work, I believe, but yeah, I mean, I do think so. For example, like one thing that I would like to see more of in awards is separation of like the type of person who entered. So like not comparing an individual to the New York Times.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because they have like a completely different resources available to them. Like a solo creator versus like a huge team in a huge organization.
Yeah.
Like it's very difficult. But then at the same time, you're trying to showcase the best, right? Like that was one of the big things that we talked about as a pro of awards, that it shows the best. And so it's I think you're right that categories is a good way to tackle that.
Right, like you don't need to have, you don't need to have like healthcare individual, healthcare organization, policy, you don't need to have it like that gradated. You could just have, the general topic categories and then have a separate category that's like solo creator and have,
Best
gold,
individual.
silver, and bronze for best solo creation.
Yeah, they have like best studio or something, right? Like a sub award or best solo.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, that's what I really like about the Pudding Cup is that they specifically say this is for non-commercial, like personal projects that, was created by like like a single person or maybe like two people. There's a lot of restrictions. You can't I can't submit my Axios work to the Pudding Cup.
Yeah, maybe even just a filter. Maybe they have this like on the IIB awards. This is for small studios, less than 3 people or something. Because I could imagine if I was I wanted to hire a small studio or a freelancer, and I'm looking through the IIB awards and I'm clicking like New York Times. It's like, but I need to be able to hire someone for this work. How do I find that? But I mean, I guess that kind of maybe goes outside the scope of awards. Thinking that's their responsibility isn't.
So this is I think you've just hit on there something that I think is really interesting, right? There are a bunch of functions that awards perform in the Dataviz world, right? There's this showcase function. There is the finding people to do work function. There is the kind of rewarding people who do good work function. Are awards the best way to do those things, or are they just the default way? Like, I think that there are so many better ways to raise a community up than pick favorites, right?
Yes. Well,
I mean, yes, but again, I almost feel like I'm sure there are, and I would love to hear suggestions of them, but I also feel that, I don't know, awards do play, like, I think there is a place for them. It's almost like the, criticism, right? Like criticism of art exists because, it gives more meaning to it, in my opinion. Because if we just say, oh, congrats, everyone's great, we're all amazing, good for you, like, then nobody's, then nothing is
manning me slightly there, because that's definitely not what I was
saying.
I
don't mean that that's what you're suggesting at all. This is not to say this is Duncan's suggestion. Like I said, there are, I'm sure, much better ways and specific ways that, achieve the same goals. But I think just to preempt this argument that perhaps some people out there have, I think there is a reason to separate work based on, judging or criticism.
Yeah. How would you get the social proof without an award?
I mean, I think that, so let's look at Michelin stars, right? Michelin stars are extremely effective in what they do. They don't award one best restaurant in the world every year. They reward the ones that meet a certain level of quality criteria, and that level is quite high. But if you get above that level and they have been and tasted your food, then you get a star. Like, I don't see any reason why an awards couldn't just like stop at the shortlist phase and create an annual catalog of really good work that doesn't necessarily award winners. And there could be an unlimited number of pieces in that catalog.
That's interesting. You're saying like you submit you have people submit, you have a long list, maybe like, okay, so here's some really good stuff. And then you're basically submitting yourself for IIB stars. And you can be like, put it on your website. Here, this is a 5-star IIB visualization, and sort of like bragging rights. Like
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say like 5-star, but this won the golden, I don't know, let's call it the golden will or whatever. And so there's this little picture of Will's face on, like, if Will was running an awards, you get a golden will, you get a golden will. You don't get a golden will because yours, I don't think it's quite good enough. I think it could have been better in this, and this regard. Like, I think that would, to me, be a more effective way of performing a lot of those positive functions that we talked about awards doing without the negatives of reinforcing power structures. And, something that we haven't talked about so much, but is really, something that I've felt personally, is that awards are super demotivating when you work really hard and you don't win. They're great if you win, they suck if you don't.
Yeah, it does feel like when you take the time to submit something and you're excited about it, and then you feel you're not recognized for it, there's just a whole lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and it also gets around the things that Will was talking about subjectivity, because data viz is an art form and art is subjective. An award kind of, okay. You get
well, I mean,
going with that.
So I agree. I think I really love your idea of basically doing the Michelin star guide of data visualization. I think to some degree the awards already do that, and I don't know the exact specifics. So I don't want to say, oh, this is exactly how it's run, but you mentioned the short list of IIB, which is sort of getting at that idea of there's no limit. I mean, there's sort of a soft limit. I think in their head, they've said typically we try to get it down to about 10 per category for the short list, but that's not a hard rule. And so SND, I don't think that they have a strict limit of how many awards they give. So for example, the last award, they gave 10 gold medals, 24 silver medals, 115 bronze, and then 500 something awards of excellence. And so there are projects where in the same category, there'll be 4 silver medals.
But does the presence of a silver and a gold medal make a bronze medal worth less? I think it does.
I mean, if we're going by the Michelin guide, then do the 3-star Michelin restaurants make the 1-star restaurants less?
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe I'm arguing for not quite the Michelin system, but just you either get a star or you don't.
Yeah.
Situation, right?
Yeah. I do think that I don't know. I can see both sides of the argument, because in terms of the Michelin guide, I think it's interesting because just to get any star is such a high level of quality that you have to reach, that I don't think you feel bad if you're like a 1-star restaurant, right? You still feel great because you're like, wow, even to get 1 star is amazing.
Yes.
And then to get 2 and 3 stars, it's somewhat subjective, but also they've laid out very specific things that you need to reach that level. And that might not be something you care about, as a restaurant, to reach a 3-star, you need this certain particular amount of service experience, and it's all about the ambiance and the wine. Everything is considered, it's not just about the food. And they have, sort of, again, it's like a soft cap, but they have here's what you would need to reach, supreme over the top excellence in ambiance. And maybe you're a restaurant where you're I'm a chill, casual place, I don't care about that. And so I think there could be something similar in the whatever Michelin guide to DataViz is. But
yeah. I mean, to argue against my own suggestion a little bit here, I think one of the big downsides of having any kind of awarding system is that it says the purpose of art is to make people judging your work happy, not the purpose of art is to make you, the creator, happy. And I think that is kind of I don't think it's the right message to be sending. I mean, I guess it depends on why you are doing the awards in the first place. But if let's presume that you are doing the awards because you want to, boost the quality of the work being produced by the community and reward the best of it, then yeah, I'm not sure that is a good message that you want to be sending to your community. That your job is to make the judges happy, not make you happy.
I kind of feel like people have to take personal responsibility with why they're even submitting to awards. Like, when I am evaluating an opportunity that's going to take time, I like to think about what my expectations are, what I want to get out of it. What's in it for me? I mean, I understand what's in it for other people for this awards, but what's in it for me? I specifically want to have some social proof. That's what I want, especially at the beginning of my career. I want to have social proof. So whether the judges happen to like it or not, I don't really care. I just want to write my lottery ticket and try to, here's a chance for me to get some social proof. If I don't get it, then I'll try to get it another way. But it does feel like, to me, this is a way to try to get some social proof. So I don't feel like you need to know ahead of time. Okay, is that what you're looking for when you're submitting, or are you looking for ego boost? Like, yes, I'm the top in my field, or I specifically was able to not game the system, but figure out successfully what the judges wanted, what you have to know ahead of time, what your personal goal is when you submit. And then whatever the system they have for submitting, that's out, or for winning, that's really out of your control. But I really like your idea of the stars, just in the fact that so many people can win, and it's not like they have to pick the one person, and it's so subjective. It's like, well, what's the difference between gold and silver and bronze? Right. It's someone's opinion or mood that day. But if you do have people submitted, we cleared the field, and based on these criteria, here are the 1 stars, which is super good. And then basically the short list would be 2 stars, and then maybe they can do kind of top 1% of being 3 stars or something. And then
I think I'd still like to see just you make it or you don't. You get the stamp of approval because your project is good enough to be recognized as a great example of DataViz, or you don't. I think that's true. I like that system better because I do think that while you're right that in the Michelin star system, the 1 stars are rare enough that they're still an achievement. I think in the scale, because there's millions of restaurants all over the globe, right? There aren't millions of DataViz. Well, there probably are millions of DataViz being created around the world, but there definitely aren't millions of DataViz being entered into DataViz awards. There's maybe thousands, right?
Well, here's a question, Duncan. What percentage of do you think would be appropriate for?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question.
Put a number on it.
Yeah. I want you to commit, Duncan, right here, right now. 50%,
sure.
1,000 submit.
I think it probably should be. I think it probably should be something around the top 25 to 10%. That's what I would think would be a good number.
So I'm in the short list.
Yeah,
I would say top 10%,
or something like that, or the top decile of all DataViz people. I think that feels like gut feeling about the right place, but I think also you should be able to judge how, I don't know, the quality of the field by the amount of those stars that are being given every year.
That's true.
I would love it to be. I would love us to be in a situation where 50% of the projects created in a given year are good enough to get that star. That would be an amazing situation for the community. So I think it's less about having a particular number threshold and more about having a quality threshold and figuring out as a community how we judge that. And that's a really difficult thing to do. Like we're just brushing over that. It's hard.
Especially with different categories, like what's your rubric for data art? What's your rubric for a dashboard?
Absolutely. but it's not an impossible task, and it is something that will undoubtedly change over time. You know, you would do a first pass at it. The next year you would refine it. Then maybe the field changes a bit. You refine it again. It becomes a process rather than an outcome.
Yeah, because the judges probably have a rubric now of some sort.
Yeah, there are criteria.
Really, it's just you're grading on some sort of criteria, and then instead of making a short list and winners taking it that far, just being like, all right, the top 10% of these scores get a star.
Yeah.
I like that. I like the top 10%. You know, I think, you need a level of quality. Otherwise it becomes meaningless. But I don't think it, like, to your point, I don't think it diminishes anyone's achievement to have other achievements as well. You know, it's no one cares if there's 5 gold medals given out or whatever. You know,
yeah, you're
so.
Right.
I don't know. I think if I got a bronze or a silver, I'd be like, oh, I didn't get a gold, did I?
No, yeah, I
and I still get envy of
not the best, is it?
You know? and it would give you that demotivating feeling when you don't win.
Yeah, I guess depending on your expectations, because if you're bronze. Yeah, it depends what you want. Because if I got bronze, I'd be like, well, I could still say I'm award winning. I won an award. It was brown, but
right. Like I think you really have to have an expectation of like what you're going in. Like, what are you going into this for? Like, what are you trying to get out of it?
You're right, though. It forces you to compare.
I think to me, like I've always viewed awards as something I do for other people, not for myself. And so I don't feel bad when I lose.
Can you talk about that a bit? Who do you do it for? Is it your parents, or is it your
no? Like I do
it
it for like potential employers, right? I just do it to it's a resume stamp. It's cred, but like it has I've never thought of awards as, you know, I would never enter any of my work into awards if it didn't matter to other people. So, because I think there's just so many inherent problems, right? Like all the things that we've talked about, being judged against other people, like resources, all these things. So,
and I do think that's a mature mindset, because when I first started, and in 2018, I submitted a work to the IIB Awards, and I did feel like it would mean a lot to me to win, or, you know, I wasn't expecting to win, but like I got longlisted, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm new to this field, and someone in, you know, that's established in this field saw my visualization and thought like, that's not garbage. You know, so it did feel good to me. But you're right, like as I've matured in the field, and maybe that's because we have accomplished a little bit in the field where we don't feel like we need
other aspects of third party credibility.
Right. Yeah, we've already gotten a good amount of social proof where we're not like, my ego.
Yeah. And I mean, it's definitely not a knock on anybody that, like, you know, if you submit for an award and you lose and you feel terrible, like that is a very normal human emotion to feel. I think, I don't know, maybe it's just, maybe I just have such low expectations.
No, I think you've matured, and you've gotten you've gotten your work like recognized, and you're like, yes, I do good work. I mean,
and like it does, like it feels good to win. But I never feel bad when I lose, I guess. I think like maybe, I don't know. I did sports growing up for, 18 years or whatever. So I have lost a lot and gotten very, very used to the feeling of losing.
Yeah. I think that's probably a large part of it. Absolutely.
So yeah.
There's one other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is that awards represent a field looking inward at itself rather than outward at what's happening in other fields. And something that we talk quite often about is the value of looking outward at other fields rather than just looking at other data visualizations for inspiration. So what does that mean for awards?
Do you have any thought? Do you want to start on that, Duncan?
No,
It feels like
I mean,
something that you would answer.
I mean,
That's
no, I
a
was
pretty
just kind
deep
of
question,
thinking about
Duncan.
It is a deep question. I mean, I've kind of, I guess I've sort of like said, I've kind of hinted already at what I think, which is that I really like seeing cross-pollination between different fields, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if it is, and I think that one potential issue with awards, like maybe you see it in the Oscars, right? Everybody talks about Oscar bait films. People make films specifically to win Oscars.
Yes.
And so it kind of like converges on one very specific type of film that everyone thinks is the type of film that wins awards. And I really don't want to see something similar happening in, I'm not suggesting that this is happening at the moment, but I wouldn't want to see something similar happening in data visualization where people make a particular kind of visual, maybe like a scrolly telling thing or something, because only scrolly telling things win awards. Like maybe that's a more practical example.
I mean, I can tell you that ship has sailed, because that happens that is a very, very, very common and well-known issue in journalism awards. So, people in journalism, in data journalism, talk about the awards bait all the time. And it's very obvious usually because what happens is, like, the month before the awards set deadline or whatever, the submission deadline, like all the big outlets will release their like really flashy, crazy technical like expertise stuff. It's just like, all right, like
the scrolly, all the satellite imagery and reconstructing 3D.
Exactly. So, and there's projects, not to say that like those are bad projects or anything, but there are times that you look at things and you just think like, okay, like you didn't, there were decisions that were made here that were not purely made for like, this is the best way to tell the story.
Right. So I think we can agree that that is something that is bad for the community, right? And bad for the art form being brought forward. Yeah. So I think that's kind of like what I'm getting at about awards being a field looking inward rather than outward. But I don't know how you would reward like looking outward. I do know that in the past, I don't know if this is the case this year, but in the past, IIB Awards have recruited most of their judges from outside of the field. It's not DataViz people judging. And I think that that is a really, really interesting way of trying to get more, I guess, like diversity of thought among the jury. I think that can be really, really helpful.
I would definitely like to see some and some, because I think there's an advantage certainly to having people that really know the field to be able to judge some of the subtleties, and understand, for example, like, oh, I can tell that this was a lot of work behind the scenes to put this together.
Especially when it's something data related, like you have to know that there's a lot of work on the back end.
But I agree that having the outside is a really important component too, not to be so insular and just be rewarding. Oh, wow, that was so, cool. The technical thing they did, I bet that was tough to pull off. So I'll give them the award.
Because the point is to convince people outside of DataViz that DataViz is, or part of the point anyway, is to convince people outside of DataViz that DataViz is great.
Part of the point. I think it's a lot of internal as well. Like, I don't know, in my mind, I would say for me, the biggest part of winning an award is proving to people inside the community, because those are the people that are going to be hiring me, right? If you're looking for clients, I suppose, if you work with clients that are outside the community, then yes. But if you're someone who's trying to get a full-time job in data visualization, be hired by a newspaper or a design studio or something, you're looking to impress people inside your field. So
maybe something to keep that phenomenon you were talking about, Duncan, about people making things for the awards, is you can have part of the judging criteria like an innovation score or like novelty score. I don't know, something like that you haven't seen before, something like that, where it's not like, okay, a really cool scrolly telling thing, like we've seen this already, or that's going to score low on the innovation score because we've done this already.
And I think that is, I know, for example, that like SND has a rubric, and that is part of it. So innovation, that's part of the rubric. Just one part. And
then one other thing that I wanted to ask is about the merits of awarding projects versus people. Do either of you have strong opinions about which of those we should be awarding, or both? Or neither, something else maybe.
Maybe both. I mean, I don't have super strong opinions. I will just say one thing that really gets on my nerves is when, like, let's say one person wins like 7 awards. So I do find it annoying when 20% of the awards go to like a single person or a single organization.
Yeah, a team or something like that.
Yeah, I do see that's annoying. I see that is annoying, but at the same time, I mean, if they're at the top of their game and they're really, really good, I just feel like I don't like when someone's like, "Oh, you can't win anymore because you've won too much." It's like, that doesn't seem fair.
that doesn't. I agree. I agree that doesn't seem fair.
Yeah. What's the cutoff? How successful am I not allowed to be?
I mean, I agree. It doesn't seem fair, but it's there's. I don't know. That
happens with athletes. Like if you're playing tennis at the same time as Roger Federer, I'm sorry, you're never winning anything.
Well, I mean, with that, it's so different because there's like an objective score, right? Like if Usain Bolt keeps winning because he's the fastest, good for him. I can't make any arguments against that.
I mean, what about ice skating or something? Because that's judged.
Yeah, I do think that has its own problems, right? Like there's a lot of articles and talk about the issues in judging in those sports. And I think that like when you look at something, the award shows, the Oscars or the Emmys are good examples because the Emmys in particular, because you have the same show running year after year. And it's well known that the Emmys have like a penchant for picking a favorite and then awarding that show or that person year after year after year after year. Famously, Alec Baldwin won like 7 years in a row for Best Actor for 30 Rock at the same time that Steve Carell was in The Office. And like, not that Alec Baldwin wasn't amazing and great, but like Steve Carell was also giving, one of the greatest performances ever. And every single year he lost.
They should do stars and not awards.
Yeah, exactly. It would solve the issue.
That's interesting because I feel much less comfortable about giving stars to people rather than projects. And I'm trying to figure out why.
Well, I like the idea of giving it to projects just because it makes it easier for like when a lot of times these things are collaborations. So giving it to the project.
And also I think actually it's quite easy to understand why I feel uncomfortable because one of them says this project wasn't good enough. The other one says you are not good enough. And that is a very different statement to be making.
Yeah, you're judging that. Here's the performance that you did, not you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is tough. I mean, I don't know who has individual awards. I know IIB has something, right?
They do.
Yeah, they have a few.
Like best individual or something.
But you don't enter for them. They get chosen from what you have entered.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I think SND has something which you can enter for, and it's not technically best person, but it kind of is. It's like best portfolio, like best individual portfolio.
Oh.
So
that's interesting. Yeah, and that makes me a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, it's your portfolio we're judging, not you, but like.
And then I suppose there's also, there's all of these questions about like separating the art from the artist, which that we can go into a very deep rabbit hole on that, which we're not going to. But I think that's probably another good reason to recognize projects over people, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask one final question that could be a rabbit hole, but we'll try to give a yes or no. Should you have a monetary prize for awards?
No.
Yeah, I don't really see the benefit unless you're trying to why do people do that? So that to entice people to enter? I guess is really
I don't know.
What they do?
I guess probably incentive. Yeah.
I think if the monetary prize is high enough, like it doesn't have to be like a life-changing amount of money, but it could fund somebody who is good to do work that they might not otherwise do because it isn't commercial. Do you see what I mean? You almost think of it as like a stipend for future work. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it's a really kind of minefield place. So you have to be careful. I'm not like always in favor of money for awards, but the context here, I guess, is that a lot of awards do give monetary prizes. I think IIB in the past has given monetary prizes.
Yeah, I think they are this year too.
Yeah. And I will say, so the pudding cup, the thing that I won, came with a prize. And that was the one case where I was like, I feel grateful and comfortable that this comes with a prize, because it was for non-commercial personal projects, individuals. And, it wasn't, like Duncan said, it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was a very nice amount of money at a time when I was very poor. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that, especially if you're able to broaden the awards beyond richer countries. Like something that is not life-changing to somebody in the West might be extraordinarily life-changing to somebody who lives in a poorer country.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that, I guess I didn't make that distinction between, if someone in the IAB Awards wins and they're, Axios, it's like, here's your $1,000 check, Axios. Like, you don't need that.
Yeah,
I guess they're
exactly.
recouping some cost of submitting.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea of giving it to individuals, but I don't know, do companies really need it? I don't
think any company needs money from an awards
the $500
ceremony.
from,
Yeah. But yeah, it is a nice way. I really like what Duncan said about, if it's an award that is specifically for like personal projects, non-commercial stuff, experimental stuff, it is a great incentive of, again, you're not guaranteed to get that money, but like this is a way to keep you going and provide a little bit of extra gas to devote time to those projects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now that we're talking about it, I mean, like, what is a kind of art stipend or a paid art residency or something like that, other than kind of an award that doesn't really get made public?
Yeah.
You submit a bunch of work that you've done in the past. You talk about something you want to do in the future, and they're like, yeah, your work is really good. Have some money.
Yeah, honestly,
I'd be really interested in seeing a model like that appear in the data visualization world. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't. I think
I would
really,
love
really
to see
cool.
that. Yeah.
That would be cool. Like you pay to submit to the awards, right? And then if you get a star, the whatever funds they got, or like they have a big pot and then they distribute it amongst the stars.
Yeah, and but it's specifically intended to fund you to do future work on something that you are passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And part of it is that maybe the organization then gets the rights to show that work or something like that.
Oh.
I think that would be a really cool system.
Yeah, I mean, these, this could be a separate conversation, probably. Maybe we'll talk about this in the future. But I mean, this does exist to a certain degree, right? Like you said, this is an artist residency or something.
Yeah,
and there are artist residencies which accept, data visualization or data visualization adjacent work.
But are there any that focus on it? I don't think so.
I mean, RAND, right?
Yeah, I suppose
but
there's
you
RAND.
can apply to that, though, right? Or they think they did a call or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be an application, right? For any of these residencies or something, you're going to have to submit an application and a proposal and be selected from a group of people. So, yeah.
But wouldn't it be so cool if, like, next year there were, 20 Data Visualization Society fellows that get paid maybe 3 months worth of salary to make a piece of work based on their, what they made the previous year in the awards or something like that?
I guess you would have to. It would for like an independent person or something. Like I can imagine, like for Will, be like, I don't know, we need another job over the summer.
I mean,
but maybe you wouldn't apply if you had a job in that situation,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really tough, right? Like, agreed, that would be awesome. I think a more realistic scenario is like maybe 5 people get funded for like a month. For like 1 month, because I just did the math and we're talking like $100,000 plus for the other scenario. So
that was very quick math. I'm impressed.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Who knows what is a livable wage?
Yeah, I know. That's the another hard part.
It's
trying to figure that out. But it's also, I mean, you could maybe have something like you could have less, like just a cash prize and it's a lot less, or you could take the residency and which is more money, but there's an expectation of output.
Right. They do these micro grants, right? Like there's some people have done that for artists and stuff. anyways, I think we should talk about this on a future episode. You know, the idea of grants and fellows and residencies and that's an interesting concept. So
I think it's something that isn't very explored in DataViz because it is more often, it is rarely seen as an art form by existing art organizations.
Yeah.
Because it is like quite nerdy and everything. I mean, you know, I'm talking in huge, like broad brushes here. Obviously, there are plenty of art organizations that do respect data work and everything. But we'll save this for the conversation.
I think we've definitely exhausted the awards conversation, and now we have a new system. So anybody listening can
make it happen,
feel free
people.
to take the IIB or the Michelin star concept and run with it.
Yeah, the wills.
If anybody knows somebody at the Michelin Guide, you can put us in touch. We've got a great idea for them. The next Michelin Guide could be the Michelin Guide to charts.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us for the Elevate Dataviz show, and join us again in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye.